The language of deceit. Notes and extracts. Circles and circuits. The past and the present only exist in the mind. To control people, you must simply control the present state of the mind. You must detain or entertain the brain, causing it only to retain specific sets of data that will, of course, soon be reinforced. You must capture attention as a magician would, with sleight of hand and illusion. Time spent with a focus on this will always equate to time not spent on that. Human behavior is a result of processes and patterns that we call habits. Basically, anything that we can be persuaded to do again and again, however ridiculous it may seem. The mind is the ultimate target of all information and communication. It is the main framework for what will become of our actions. Actions that will determine who we are and who we shall become. Behavior and attitude are also interrelated, to the extent that if you control one, then you inevitably influence the other. Furthermore, if the mind could be wiped, then all thought could be controlled. A clean slate is a most impressionable surface. The masses could then easily be categorized or programmed or reprogrammed into specific classes. From information, there is little possibility of escape, which makes it very hard for us to be conscious and live in the moment, as we remain often fearful and anxious of what was or what is to come. A quest for escapism or addictions are an expression of this. Just another sign that the system within which we live may be overloading the mind of the individual to breaking point. Those who are never left to be will never be able to find out who they truly are or what they are capable of when left to their own devices. In the USA in 1975, the Church Committee hearings uncovered that various government intelligence agencies would regularly experiment on individuals without the knowledge or consent of the individual. Science and psychology had long ago become weaponized enough to affect and influence culture, society, and self-image in general. Countless agencies experimented in hospitals, prisons, and schools. All of the typical state institutions that should have been more careful and less carefree. The bodies were buried everywhere. There were few limitations. There was little regulatory oversight. Electrodes were used to stimulate and map out the brain. Pharmacological supplies were dropped into water supplies. Additives crept into the food manufacturing processes. the agrochemical industries began to expand. Results were recorded, and step by step, a model of human consciousness, however warped, was created. It was, however, a creation of dark deeds, for the brain would appear to have buttons, and learning could then become a series of conditioned behaviours. Outcomes could be predicted and expected. This was nothing new to the initiated. B.F. Skinner, 1904 to 1990, an American psychologist, had already talked about apron conditioning. This was a study of negative and positive reinforcements and punishments, which show transformative and effective results on people who had independent ideas and goals. This was enthusiastically integrated into school systems throughout the Western world in the form of credits and tests and even scholarships. The entitled subconscious influence and triggers of which would be carried with us throughout our lives. Impressions formed at a young age affect all subsequent actions. Human values would be reduced to a simple perception of risk versus benefit, absent of any deeper philosophy. Throughout Nazi Germany in the 1930s, there had been all types of inhuman social experiments performed on human beings, from babies to pregnant women to concentration camp prisoners. There were breeding programs, socialization programs, and conditioning programs, all of which would later be successfully exported. After World War II, the Allied countries, mainly America, Russia, England, and Canada, were fighting over the German scientists and access to the results of their work. A large majority of these scientists were used through a Vatican-sponsored plan called Project Paperclip to found NASA, where German rockets were then used in the US space program. The work of the scientists had to continue. It was imperative. The atomic experiments being an example of the scientists' increasing godlike powers. One of the most famous and deeply disturbing mind control programs that we know about started in America in the 1950s. It was called MK Ultra. At that time, certain elements of society felt that the mind needed to be conquered. Ideas needed to be molded. The US government used many unwitting citizens in their project. This included hospital patients, army veterans, and disabled school children. It is also noteworthy that these experiments were not limited to the USA, but were also secretly conducted under national security in many other countries, including the Soviet Union and the United Kingdom. These covert projects were conducted in absolute and total secrecy and funded by indirect taxpayer donations to front organizations that worked in quiet and hid their research and findings from the public. Today, as many of the records were destroyed, We still live very much in the darkness as to what was and perhaps still is being done in the shadows. Although laws may exist in one country to limit such nefarious activities, research could now simply be moved to another facility in another country or offshore. Who truly knows what goes on behind closed doors, in and around or under well-funded faculties or institutions? Experimentation by man on man would become the next big scientific field that aimed to codify understanding of human behavior, with the ultimate aim of creating people who are responsive only to specific commands. You can't help but notice the irony of the word robot or robotnik having the original meaning of worker. The transforming man and woman into automatons using simple digital processes was almost complete. The West had people within whom whole ideas could be implanted. With the mind captivated early, there would be little opportunity to break free later in life. When you miss breakfast, it is impossible to turn the clock back and eat what you first missed. Disenabling would become a very profitable art. Isolation and deprivation would become the main forms of manipulation. Your very identity begins to disintegrate within days when you are deprived of the ability to use your natural senses. A lack of contact with reality can cause people to lose touch completely. Progress requires the ability to sense that things are changing around us and that we must consciously adapt. Changes in the environment are essential to human growth and understanding. Without external stimuli, one is left in a closed circuit of an endless loop. This way, anyone can be broken. Social pressure is mind control. The unrelenting drive of a specific message that is regularly repeated and then forms an anchor deep inside. It shapes us. It informs our subconscious and unconscious realities and affects our decision-making faculties. To this extent, we should always remain aware that suggestions can have long-lasting effects. The language of deceit. Notes and extracts.